As you may already know, my name's Clare Baker and I'm a former clutterholic and borderline hoarder. I successfully cleared all my clutter over 20 years ago without the need for an expensive home visit. And I've been helping people around the world do exactly the same ever since, so that they too can know what it's like to live a completely clutter-free life forever. I like to share my experiences both before and after I cleared my clutter to help fellow clutterholics and hoarders and their friends and family to understand some of the thoughts, feelings and experiences that we have when we struggle with clutter. What I share is not intended to be a judgment or criticism of anyone that I mention, although I fully understand that some people may take it that way. There are at least three perspectives on the same experiences, yours, mine, and the facts of the experience that probably lay somewhere in between. I share my perspective on my experiences, which is a reflection from which I can share my learning with others who may have had or are having similar experiences. When I was clearing my clutter and imagining my best life, I envisioned getting married, having a family, and living happily ever after. Just to be clear, I didn't wish or hope for these things. Like everything in life that you value, they didn't come easy, and that vision has had to evolve. It all began 20 years ago when I got clear and specific with my vision of my best life, which included the type of man that I wanted to share my best life with. I made a list of all the negative qualities and behaviours of the men I had dated and the qualities I didn't want in my future husband. Then I made a list of all the positive opposites of those qualities and behaviours so that I was clear about what I did want and could recognise it. This was surprisingly hard to do. It's always easier to identify the negatives than the positives. But just like our clutter clearing, we need to be clear and specific about what we want and what success looks like. Then one night I started putting that checklist to work. A friend of mine and I got tipsy so we could summon up the courage to sign up to a dating website. Very modern back in 2004. Keith was the first man I contacted. He didn't have a picture, but his profile description sounded kind, honest and genuine. Keith and I started chatting online and he quickly suggested we meet in person, which absolutely terrified me. Although, of course, it was obvious we were going to have to meet at some point after all. How else was a relationship going to work? We met up in a country pub and stayed long after they closed. We just sat there in the dark talking. Conversation was easy. I felt safe. We agreed on so much, and I felt I was able to just be myself around him. A whole new experience for me, especially on a first date. We became close, but just as good friends. Neither of us had any experience of having healthy relationships. Perhaps that's why we didn't rush anything. We met up regularly, talked about everything, texted each other constantly, yet weren't officially dating. I went on other dates, and so did he. We told each other everything. I even met his parents, just as a friend. After 8 months, I decided to risk rejection and tell Keith that I felt more for him than just good friends. His response was to tell me that he didn't want a relationship with anyone, which seemed odd given we had met on a dating website. However, when he later told his mother he thought he'd made a mistake saying that, she told him to sort it out. A week later, Keith picked me up to take me to the airport for a holiday I was going on alone. As he took my suitcase out of his car in the drop-off zone at the airport, he smiled, kissed me passionately, then got back in his car and drove off. Confused doesn't begin to describe how I felt. This man, who had said he didn't want a relationship with me only 1 week earlier, was now passionately kissing me as he left me at the airport. Rather unromantically, he finally confirmed that he did want a relationship with me by text the next day. We became inseparable when I returned from my holiday. As we all know, falling in love is the easy bit. It's after the end of the movie that the work really begins. Keith and I were older when we met. He was 38, I was 31. We both wanted children, so we decided to start trying for a family almost straight away. We ended up spending a fortune on trying. Then we sold my house to continue trying. We told no one what we were spending a fortune on trying to get help, because we soon realised that we didn't have emotional support from people around us. All they knew was that we were going up to London to see a doctor regularly for my back, which was true. It just wasn't the whole truth. To prove his commitment to me, Keith proposed. For us, the wedding was symbolic of the commitment we were making to each other, not a big social event. By this point, Keith was 40 and I was 32. We intended to pay for our wedding ourselves. My parents expected a traditional wedding that they paid for. To ensure we had control, we decided to get married in Paphos, Cyprus, in a small, intimate ceremony. My parents refused to attend. My brother gave me away. By the time we returned home, we had to start borrowing money to continue trying to start a family. 2 years later, and 2008 to 9 recession hit, and we were both self-employed, so we were struggling to survive. We were living on credit cards, and we had to finally give up on trying for a family after 4 years. The financial, emotional, and physical strain on us was unbearable, and unsurprisingly, the stress got too much. To cut a long story short, because neither of us were able to deal with our emotions, in the heat of the moment, we started divorce proceedings. As a result, my parents came back into our lives. We still didn't tell them our secret. We preferred for them to think that we had been irresponsible with our money, rather than knowing the truth. Getting into debt trying to have children is emotional, not logical. They would never understand because they only understand logic. After the initial anger and the reality of getting a divorce sunk in, neither Keith nor I wanted to give up on our relationship. He ticked everything on my list. Why would I give up on that? We both acknowledged that the cause of our problems was our inability to deal with our emotions because we had never been taught how. We had to be willing to move out of our comfort zone into the learning and change zone together. And counselling would help us to do that. Having stopped trying for a family because of the money and my age, we were left with huge debts and were struggling to keep a roof over our heads. In desperation, we asked my parents for financial help. They didn't understand why we had such big debts, and we weren't about to tell them the reason why. They had conditions. We had to do a full financial disclosure, sign a contract, the signing of which was witnessed by their neighbours, pay 5% interest and start repaying it immediately. They put legal charges on our property, which totalled twice what we had borrowed, just in case we defaulted. We were in the depths of despair, uncertainty and vulnerability. We knew we couldn't afford the repayments, yet we felt we had no choice but to accept. My parents were back in control. We either accepted the non-negotiable deal with them, or we sold our home, gave up our businesses and moved in with Keith's father. Now, in my view of the world, parents are supposed to be your unconditional lifeguards in life, whatever your age. We were at our lowest, and once again, my parents prioritised money and control over our relationship. Keith and I both questioned the point of living. Then a lifeguard appeared, Frank, Keith's father. He was so appalled by my parents' behaviour, he offered to give us, not lend us, the money to pay my parents every month. It was madness. Frank was giving us money so we could pay my millionaire parents so that we could keep a roof over our heads and live off what money we made from our businesses. Frank made us promise that when the time came, Keith's inheritance wouldn't go to my parents. A financial advisor said it was the best to pay off the debt. It meant my parents got most of Keith's inheritance. Yet what mattered was that Keith and I had survived the very worst. We'd been able to keep our secret, and we had come out stronger as a couple. My best life with Keith is something that didn't come easily. We've been in the panic zone many times, yet we've always found our way back to our comfort zone via the learning and change zone. Our life together didn't quite work out how we imagined. We have fur babies, not human babies. The list I made over 20 years ago with the qualities that I wanted in a man to share my best life with is framed here in my office. The most important of those qualities has been someone willing to adapt, learn, and is open to change. I'm so glad I wrote that list 20 years ago to remind me that whatever happens, the man beside me was always destined to be part of my best life. You can clear your clutter fast or you can clear your clutter forever, but you can't clear your clutter forever fast. However long it takes, if it helps you live your best life, then it's worth it.